Hello and welcome to this quick guide on how to use UI animations in Crayta. So the UI animations will exist within the widgets and the HTML code within the widgets that you write for your game. And we can take a look at some UI animations. If I pick up this pistol, you can see that I've got a bouncing animation going on. And then if I start the game and I shoot my gun, you can see the buttons are animated and they disappear when I shoot the gun. So the way we do this is simply by using the GameFace API to add classes during the course of the game. And we add our classes to the divs using this data-bind-class-toggle. So we can use this and then the name of the class here, followed by colon, and then the condition of whether this class should be added to this div or not. So rather than using the data bind if to turn things completely on or off, we can add a class to a certain element, HTML element, and then we can make things like the opacity 0 or 1 depending on whether we want it to be visible. So 0 opacity would make it invisible, and if the opacity is set to 1, it will be visible. By using properties in CSS to do this, rather than by turning the HTML on or off using our responsive GameFace framework. If I use the CSS to do it, we can use some of the other CSS properties, like the transition property, for example. And the transition property allows us to specify other properties that change according to what classes are added to an element. And we can specify how long we want them to transition between the two. So when I fire my gun, and my ammo decreases, that means that each time my ammo decreases, one less bullet has the filled class applied to it until there are no more bullets with the filled class applied to them. When the filled class is taken out of the bullets HTML, then it loses these properties and it gains these. So it will lose the opacity of being 1, which is completely opaque and visible, and it will transition to opacity 0 when it loses this filled class. The amount of time it takes to transition between the two states, so this filled class and then the one without it, you can specify within the transition property here. So you can see it's got 0.2s, that means 0.2 seconds. So this is literally saying transition the opacity from whatever it was to whatever it needs to be next, and take 0.2 seconds to do that. Similarly, you can see I'm using the transform here. So I'm setting it to 0 to start with, which is the exact right position for it. And then when I've shot a bullet and that filled class is taken away from one of the bullets in my UI, then the transform turns into translate 100%. So the bullet moves down 100% of its height, and it will take 0.2 seconds to do that. And let's look at that in action. Pick up the gun. Pick up the gun. And let's fire the bullet, and you can see the bullets in the bottom left corner are disappearing. And one of the benefits of using transitions is when it comes to reset and fill those bullets back up again, it automatically will animate from the disappeared state at the bottom to being full again. So transition we use for the most simple forms of animation and from changing from one state to another. There is another type of animation property you can use in CSS, which is it's called the animation property. And I don't know if you noticed, but when I pick up the gun, you can see that the gun bounces very, very quickly like that. And because it's doing that multiple times, that's a really good opportunity to use the animation property. So if I go into my inventory, which is where that gun's displayed, and I look at this div class with item, you can see at the end of it, of this line of code, I'm using the data bind class toggle again, and I'm using I'm adding the item-full class if there is more than 0 amounts of these things. So if I have anything in that inventory, then add the item-full class. If we go to the CSS, we can see where the item-full is. it's got these two properties as a part of that class. The first one is specifying the animation to play, the amount of time to take, and the fill mode that we will use for it. So alternate reverse means go from one, play it in one direction and then play it in reverse and then play it in one direction and play it in reverse. And the animation iteration count literally says how many times to do that. Now, if you're using the animation property, you will need to specify the keyframes. So we can see I've given the animation name here of bounce scale. And if we look just below here to the keyframes, this is the animation that this is referring to. And it's done on a percent basis. So 0% is at the very beginning of the animation and 100% is at the very end of the animation. And then you can add keyframes in between. So 50% would be exactly halfway between the two, and so on. And I'm saying at 0%, make sure that the scale of that UI is set to 1. And at 100%, so when the animation is complete, set the scale to 1.5, what it should, 1.5 times what it is. And because we're doing the alternate reverse, it'll essentially go from 1 to 1.5 and then from 1.5 to 1 and backwards and forwards, and it will do that 10 times. And let's have another look at that. So when I pick up this gun, I'm going to be adding the class of item full to that inventory widget. And then it will be flashing on and off or scaling up and down very, very quickly using that animation property. So that's the main two ways that you can add animations to your UI widgets. They're great for calling attention to parts of your UI or for just adding a really nice level of polish to your already custom UI. I really look forward to seeing how you use it in Crayta.